Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Andy H. Wynn, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation this morning will be delivered by Tom Plumley, First Christian Church of Fort Worth. Thank you very much for coming out today. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges.
Thank you. Would you pray with me, please? We come in the silence of the morning, contrite, merciful one, author of creation, source of wisdom, great spirit of love. Our contrition begins our day with heads bowed before your perfection. For we occupy ourselves with relative busyness, armed beyond any measure of freedom, safe because we are able to push the warring madness into the homelands of brothers and sisters, rich beyond all measures of justice, satisfied beyond any measures of love. We have built and enjoyed a state content to build even bigger barns for those who need them least, that they might store up things and call them blessings from God. And yet this same people makes less and less available the rows on the edges of the field that are meant for the needy and the stranger. Bless, O Spirit, these good people this day who leave their homes to work for all of us in Tarrant County. Help them to be able to separate the calling of your heart from the desires of their own. Give them courage to be deaf to the siren call of personal ambition, and let them turn to the needs of your planet and your people, for whom they bear an awesome stewardship. This we ask in the confidence of your grace and your power to forgive, and in the name of all holiness. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you for coming out today, Pastor. Agenda announcements.
Your Honor, we do not have any announcements at this time.
Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of June the 4th.
Move for approval.
Second. I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Resolutions. Commissioner Wynn, I believe you have a resolution of recognition.
Judge, would you please read it into record, please?
You bet. Whereas Rotary Club, founded in 1905, provides humanitarian service and encourages high ethical standards in all vocations, and whereas the Rotary Club of Arlington, founded on May 29, 1923, is proudly one of the 34,000 Rotary clubs in the world dedicated to the ideal of service above self, and whereas the Rotary Club of Arlington is the oldest and largest Rotary Club in the city of Arlington, and whereas the Rotary Club of Arlington is more than 115 members strong, including many of the city's most prominent business, political, and community leaders, and whereas the Rotary Club of Arlington is distinguished for its public service in the community and internationally, and whereas the Rotary Club of Arlington's most notable public and community projects include the Webb Elementary School Scholarship Program, the Honduras Water Purification Project, the Arlington School Awards Program, the Dunlap Park Pavilion Project, and the Arlington School Backpack Program. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the Commissioners Court of Tarrant County, do hereby recognize and commend the many extraordinary activities of the Rotary Club of Arlington as they celebrate 90 years of dedicated service for its continued commitment to helping those less fortunate in our community and in the world. In witness whereof, we've hereunder set our hands and caused the seal of Tarrant County to be affixed this 11th day of June, 2013.
Judge, we have Mr. Cleet McAllister, the representative of the club, here with us, and I move for approval. Can you please come forward, sir?
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
How do I turn my back to that group?
Thank you very much.
The podium is yours.
Thank you.
Usually we're up here yelling at you when you're up here.
I've only been gone 2 years. You still have that privilege. Judge Whitley and Commissioners, I want to thank you for this. I proudly accept it for our President, Sam Scott, and for our incoming President, Derek Kinney. The resolution talked about many of our projects, and we've had a number of outstanding leaders, beginning with our first President, Sam Wine. And by the way, I'm not a charter member, by the way, because it's Tom Vandergriff, of course, was, I think, our youngest president. And you really can't think about Arlington Rotary without mentioning Don Mavis, past district governor and on the board of Rotary International. But the person I always think of is Jerry Mavis, who served on this commissioner's court for many, many years. Jerry always wore his pen, and you could never have a meeting on Thursday at noon because he'd be at Rotary. And, of course, our great tradition of connection with Commissioner's Court continues with Andy Wynn, who's a member of our club. So on behalf of all those who came before and brought us to this point, and on behalf of those who will make our 10th decade even better, I want to say thank you very much. And by the way, we were founded on May 29th, but we received our charter on June 11th, 1923, which today would be 90 years. Thank you very much.
Well, great. Thank you, Judge.
Rotary truly is a great organization, and I think has done a lot for to promote peace in the world and to take on projects like alleviating polio and many of the other projects, water purification and different things like that they do. Cleet, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Court members, you have before you the consent agenda.
Move approval. Second.
We have motion and second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Manningham.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the Court, we have two items yet for you this morning. The first one, we're requesting that the Court approve Commissioner Brooks as the county's designated delegate and Commissioner Fickus as first alternate to the 2013 NACO conference, which will be held.
Move approval. Second.
We have motion and second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Members of the Court, as it relates to that item, that conference is in July, obviously, and the last day official of the conference is the 22nd, which is a Monday, but there will be follow-up meetings that next morning on the 23rd. So we're going to recommend to the Court that we do not have court on the 23rd of July. So if you'll mark your calendars, we would appreciate it.
And I might just add, we've got, I've talked with some of you all about the upcoming conference. We've got a lot of stuff going on, and I'm going to get a printed itinerary of just the things that would be available. I know you've got a transportation steering committee dinner. I think you've got a couple of events also going on. There's some receptions. TransCanada's got a reception that will all be included in on the Thursday evening, which is the 18th. Then the Friday evening, I know you have your transportation steering committee. Saturday evening is the Board of Directors reception and down at TCC, and certainly all of us are invited to that, as is the Sunday evening will be there's a large urban county caucus and a rural action caucus that has a reception. That's going to be at the Riata. They've taken the whole Riata for that evening. And then Monday night is Billy Bob's with Pat Green and some entertainment from that. So it's going to be, we're expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 plus folks. So we're excited about it. Got a lot of stuff going. And again, I appreciate y'all. I know kind of helping with that, and we'll get a more formal itinerary out to y'all. We also have some workshops that some of our folks are doing. We had actually put in for some 20 or 25 different workshops. Those are all picked by some of the folks in NACO, and we ended up only picking up about 3 or 4, I think, out of a total of about 40-something workshops that will be going on. So there's a lot of opportunities to kind of hear how things are being done in some of the other areas of the country, as well as it being a time when we set our legislative priorities and really talk about it. We've got a new executive director that took over about a year ago. In fact, I guess a year ago was his first annual conference, and he's really hit the ground running. His name is Matt Chase, and so he'll be here and with about a year under his belt. I know that TAC has been a big help with us in this process, and they're bringing in folks to help with the registration and a big crowd. And then we have an election, big election. There are 4 people currently running for what we call the second vice president, which is kind of the entry into the executive committee. And right now we have 4 candidates, and so it looks like it may be an exciting election process. So
I'd just like to add for the record, Your Honor, that on Friday morning, the Healthy Counties Initiative, in conjunction with the Behavioral Health Subcommittee of the Health Steering Committee, will be taking a tour of the mental health unit at John Peter Smith. And after that tour, we'll gather in the board meeting room for a briefing on the 1115 waiver process and how it might affect other counties across the country. I chair the Healthy Counties Initiative, and we're looking forward to that set of discussions and to being able to show off some of the best practices that we have here in Tarrant County. Also that evening, the National Organization of Black County Officials, which I also chair, will be having a social event, and we will make sure that all of the court and anybody else who is interested will be invited to that event.
thank you. So as questions come up over the next couple of weeks, I know it's going to be, it's getting busier and busier, and I really want to thank everyone who's kind of helped with that and is helping with the different aspects of that conference.
Members of the court, if we could move to item 2, I'm going to ask Mr. Mendez to address the court on this particular issue. We're also going to consolidate our briefing, legislative briefing, into this item 2. So, Mark.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Your Honor, members of the court. We've got a couple of action items for your consideration this morning. First, harking back to the regular session of the legislature, in the final hours of the session, a bill was passed that deals with appraisal review boards. And it's a 32-page bill, but it picked up a couple of amendments at the very end that were proved to be of some concern to the appraisal districts and to the counties. The bill was House Bill 585. The first amendment expanded the type of exemption cases where the court shall order attorney's fees, and it is the opinion of all the county advocate groups that this will increase frivolous litigation. And the second amendment established a higher standard of clear and convincing evidence for an appraisal district to meet when adjusting appraised values, and it has the ultimate effect, in our opinion, that it would shift the tax burden from commercial properties that don't get reviewed very often and shift that burden onto residential properties. The Conference of Urban Counties has taken a position in opposition to this. They have voted to request a veto from the governor, and you have before you a letter also requesting that veto from the governor. Happy to
Move
answer.
approval of the letter.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Moving on to the special session items. Originally, you had before you a letter requesting the call to be open for transportation funding issues. I'm sure you've all read the papers this morning and see that the governor has indeed opened that call, so we are pulling down that particular letter, and instead, I have a substitute letter for your consideration. This letter is addressed to the chairman of both the House and the Senate Transportation Committees, and it is in support of the Senate Joint Resolution Number 2 and House Joint Resolution Number 9 for transportation funding. These joint resolutions would put a constitutional amendment before the voters in November, and it will ask that if they would approve putting half of the severance tax that now goes towards the state rainy day fund to instead go towards the building and maintaining of highways and transportation infrastructure.
And you need a motion on that right now?
Yes, yes, sir. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
The briefing item that I choose to update you on, with the expansion of the call, there's only 2 weeks from today for this special session. But the 25th will be the sine die for the special session. So there have been no hearings scheduled to date on any issue other than redistricting. There is a meeting tomorrow in Houston and a meeting in Austin of the various House and Senate committees, but nothing has been scheduled thus far on any of the other issues that have been filed, and certainly not for the transportation issue yet. So everything will start moving pretty fast if they indeed do intend to schedule any hearings and refer these bills to the committees. We will let you know as soon as any of that happens.
Mark, could you give us some idea of what the plan is concerning redistricting? I testified before the House committee in Dallas last week, and they were to hold 2 more hearings, as I understand it. But that certainly doesn't leave much, and that's just the House. That certainly doesn't leave much time to do anything. What are you hearing?
Well, the original intent was, by the governor and the leadership, was to just rubber stamp the plan that came out of the courts. Other interested parties have now weighed in on that, and you were a part of that process in testifying against or before those committees. It now looks like there is potential for some of those lines, especially in the House and in the congressional districts, to be redrawn. I have yet to see any of the new proposed maps, so I guess that's a long way of saying your guess is as good as mine at this point.
The committees that are meeting right now, are those joint Senate and House committees?
No, sir.
No.
So it's just the House?
The House committee is meeting in Houston tomorrow, and the Senate committee is in Austin tomorrow.
Okay. And then the House is recessed until what day?
Till next Monday. The Senate will be meeting briefly tomorrow, but there's nothing to act on, so those will be very, very brief meetings.
So they could come in next Monday, begin holding hearings related to the transportation stuff.
Actually, those bills have already been filed, and since the House and the Senate have recessed, those bills can be referred to committee without them meeting on the floor.
Okay.
So they could actually call hearings on those bills as early as Thursday, I guess, because they have a 24-hour layout period when
Okay.
the bill gets referred.
All right.
But we haven't seen anything scheduled at this point.
Any other questions at this time?
There are a couple bills I have a little bit concerned with our IT resources. The first one, I forgot the name of the number of the bill, but it has to do with the redaction of certain criminal records as we deal with the defense lawyers. You know anything about that?
I've heard some
that has been signed by the governor. I talked to Miles this morning. GK, do you know anything about that?
That was all part of the e-filing process. I think it's something that slipped totally under the radar for us. We We were first made aware of it after it had actually, the session was over with, and the district attorney's office discovered that issue. I don't, yeah, what it does basically, and historically, redaction action was something that was jointly worked between the prosecutors and the defense. Now it looks like it's a requirement for the prosecutor. So we're still working through that process itself. Commissioner, I don't know if it's been signed or not. If you say it's been signed, then I'm
The
assuming.
governor signed it, and I was told that we have, within the district attorney office, we have about 5.9 million records, not counting those at the sheriff's department. And we're going to have to go through those electronic records and redact the personal information as required by this new law. And then we have to create the original copy. We have to create a redacted copy, and then we have to create some sort of a third copy. So it's going to be a lot of work, and I wonder how.
Commissioner, let me recommend that we get with the district attorney's office and analyze that and determine
IT.
Yeah, obviously IT. Yeah, and determine just what kind of impact that's going to make, because
It's one of those unfunded mandates.
That's exactly what it sounds like.
Right. And on the truancy bill, the SB 1234, you know how the bill structure the fine based on the number of offenses?
That's correct. The current state of truancy fines is a $500 fine. If my understanding is if the adults are held accountable in the truancy of the child. They've changed that law under SB 1234 to a graduated fine, $100 on the first offense, $200 on the second offense, up to a cap of $500. What this does in effect is if you are relying on that revenue for the support of your truancy courts, as they are in Dallas County, for example, this could be a severe impact to the revenue supporting those courts. How that affects us, I don't know. If we indeed, since we are a party to that legislation that allows us to create those courts, that might affect our decision to create those types of courts.
Well, the challenge here is, in order to assess fine, the judge will have to know how many offenses the students have on their record, right? So to do that, there need to be a common database of truant cases throughout the state. Is there such a common database?
My understanding is that does not exist, especially since a lot of those cases are filed in municipal courts, and some of them are filed in JP courts, and they don't share information at this point on truancy. So that does present a problem.
But a truancy case is brought by an individual school district, which would have that information, at least as regards that student's matriculation in their district.
Not necessarily if the student transfer from one district to the next.
I said as regards their matriculation in that particular school district.
So that is something that we have to work through.
yes, sir.
Okay. Is there any way that you can kind of work with the district attorney office to really interpret the meaning of some of the languages?
We are in the process of working with our partners in the associations to try to allocate that. We'll do what we need to do to figure out how to address this.
These are things that have kind of slipped under the radar in either one of these, or either or both of these, then we might at least make some attempt to describe or explain that to the governor and possibly get him to try to, or attempt to get him to put that on the special to try to fix that problem, especially with redaction and with some of those issues.
And that issue was not on our radar screen throughout the process. My understanding is that the District and County Attorneys Association signed off on that piece of legislation, and there was very little opposition.
Are they still in that same position?
They're still saying it's not that big a deal.
It's
Apparently it
not
is to
their
us.
money.
Is that the juvenile piece?
No, that's
It could
the,
be.
redaction.
It was supposed to have been a good bit, and how it morphed into this thing, and it has nothing to do with court records, but
Let's follow up and see what we got.
Yes, sir.
We'll have to buy a bunch of new servers.
John, before we go any further, Ms. Tidwell would like to introduce someone to the court.
Thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I've had several retirees in my office over the last several months, and we've filled one of the key positions. And I'd like to introduce Ahmad Mushala, who is my audit manager, along still with Kim Trussell, who some of you may know. So I just wanted everyone to have a chance to meet Ahmad, and that when he calls up and wants to come out and talk to you about some matter related to county finances, you'll know who he is.
Welcome aboard.
That sounds awesome.
Welcome, Ahmad.
Thank you.
Ahmad, welcome.
What do you know about OPEB?
Auditor of every.
OPEB, we'll be talking.
So we have one more auditor?
Yes. A very skilled auditor, sending your way.
Yeah, I have no doubt. You have to speak.
Marvin, are any of your things going to be done now, or we need to wait till after close? Okay.
We have one item on budget.
Okay. Ms. Snyder?
The Risk Management Board today is recommending the approval of 3 claims. They are to Donald Bear and Farmers Insurance, to Eric Jones, and Amy Leonard, and the amounts are listed on your court communication.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Glenn?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have 2 items for the court this morning, thank goodness. The first item, we're asking the court to receive and file the personnel agenda.
Move to receive and file the personnel agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file personnel agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
The second item, we're asking the court to approve the Job Evaluation Committee rules and guidelines. As the court recalls, we brought this item to you a couple of weeks ago. We had, the court had some, I think, really good discussion about this item. So what we've done, a couple of things. We have removed the sentence that addressed removal of members from the committee for inappropriate discussion, so that you'll know that that provision is gone. And then secondly, we've created an acknowledgement form that's attached to your court communique. And this acknowledgement form will be given to each committee member. And the committee member, by signing off on the document, acknowledges that they've read the rules and guidelines, that they understand the rules and guidelines, and that they agree to comply with the rules and guidelines.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I still object to the passing out of the information the day or 2 before the meeting, so I will not be voting for this item.
Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes 4-1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Beecham?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We have 2 bid award recommendations for your consideration this morning. Our first item is for RFQ 2013-061 for mammography services for the Public Health Department. Our recommendation would be to award those services to Solus Women's Health and the pathology lab services to Baylor All Saints Medical Center.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Our last item is also a bid award recommendation for bid 2013-085. This is for the demolition of the Tarrant County Northeast of Courthouse. Recommendation will be toward the low bidder, Midwest Wrecking, amount of $17,440.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
I do have a question.
Go right ahead.
Pretty widespread there.
Yes, sir. We did a scope review session with the 3 lowest bidders, and we were assured by Midwest that they knew what they were bidding, and their price would be good. Would do us a good job.
I thought you were volunteering to get on that thing and do it yourself.
Okay. I did.
Well, the last time I got on one of those things, I tore up the electrical wire, and fortunately, we had somebody on the labor detail that was an electrician and was able to fix it before Monday got there.
Goodness.
I won't be getting on anything.
Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Come on down, Bill.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Bill.
We got two items this morning. First item is it's requested that the Commissioners Court approve an interlocal agreement with the City of South Lake related to the construction of a turnaround bridge on State Highway 114. The county bond funding for this improvement will be provided by Precinct 3 discretionary bond funds.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Second item is requested that the Commissioners Court approve an interlocal agreement with the Mansfield Independent School District related to school zone flashers and signs on Retta Mansfield Road and Lillian Road. The fiscal impact to the county will be to Precinct 1's normal cost is associated with the installation of signs.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Are there any appointments today? There being none, then you have before you the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Manius?
Thank you, Your Honor, members of the court. We have two items we'd like to bring to you this morning. The first one concerns collaborative efforts and consolidation efforts between public health and the hospital district. As public health comes forward, I'd just simply like to say that, as you might recall, as we began our new fiscal year, that the court gave us a directive to work with the hospital district to see if there were areas that we could collaborate in. At least two of those areas were the preventive medicine clinic and also the laboratory. I think that we've expanded and found some other areas. I know that we're scheduling a meeting with the hospital district board itself. What we wanted to do this morning is simply give you just an overview of what we're looking at so that we can keep you informed of the process. Ms. Brewer.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As GK mentioned, last summer we were asked by the JPS board and the commissioners, you, to look at ways that we can collaborate, potentially consolidate some services, and certainly look for efficiencies of services. We've had numerous meetings since last summer with JPS staff. Our original group included Vice President Scott Rule, Kathleen Whalen overseeing the labs, and Dr. Lisa Carter representing health promotion. On our staff, we had Dr. Sandra Parker, Doug Fabio, our Associate Director, and Ann Salyer-Caldwell, Associate Director, and myself. Since then, as we've moved forward in some of these areas, as you'll be hearing, we've brought in other staff, and we also appreciate the support from some of the other county staff, and I'll mention them as we go along as well. I do have some other copies. Well, initially, three areas were identified for us to look at least to look at. These were the two existing HIV clinics. We have one in public health, and there is one at JPS. Also looking at lab work and looking at health promotion. During the course of the discussion, we also identified a potential for radiology and for performance management. I'm going to talk about the HIV clinic consolidation first of all. Early on, we recognized that this would lend itself well to consolidation. We've both had very busy clinics for a number of years. JPS is serving about 1,000 clients right now, and we're serving about 884. Several things we had to ascertain right away to see if this was even doable, which we did. One was that JPS would serve out-of-county and undocumented clients. They assured us that they do that, and we moved on from there. Second was we had to ascertain that our funds should we move over to the JPS clinic, that our funds would transfer. And we had approval from our HIV administrative agency as well as the Texas Department of State Health Services that they would support transferring funding from Tarrant County Public Health to JPS. Most of our clinic is, in fact, all of it except a very small portion of our physician's salary is funded through grants, and you have a copy of all the grants, Ryan White funding, that we receive for that program.
Excuse
Yes.
me, Lou. I am glad to see that JPS has agreed that they will serve out-of-county and undocumented residents. That's one big issue, because we cannot have people with HIV and AIDS within the general population with no access to treatment. But an equally important thing to ascertain from them is whether they will relax their eligibility requirements, because persons who have HIV and or AIDS, if they are not poor at the outset, will rapidly become so trying to fund their medical care. That's why you've got 884 people in your caseload at Public Health now, is because for one reason or another, they don't meet the guidelines for treatment at Healing Wings. I want to make sure that if we consolidate these two clinics, that service will be comprehensive across the population and that no one will be left out. I see the preventive medicine clinic as the treatment source of last resort, because you take people who do not meet the Healing Wings guidelines, and I want to make sure that comprehensive means everybody.
We certainly share your concern. Margie, do you want to say anything? Speak to that? Margie Drake is here with our HIV
And I think if she comes
administration.
forward, again, what I think our intent is to try to hold a joint meeting between JPS and this court later on over the next couple of months. And again, it is not that we're talking about JPS taking over that are consolidating and doing away with our public health. We would still have distinct lines, but that there is the potential that JPS might be acting in kind of a supervisory role with not only looking at the public health portion, but also the portion to the other indigent.
Well, I agree that there are great synergies possible between the two separate organizations, and that there are a lot of opportunities to collaborate and save our taxpayers some money. But that should not be done at the expense of overall health care in the community and at the expense of service delivery.
And I don't think any of us ever thought that was the case. Margaret?
Good morning. Your concern was about eligibility, and I just want everybody to know several years ago we worked very hard with JPS and ensured that those that are Ryan White eligible do not have to go through the same eligibility criteria as the rest of the hospital. So the Healing Wings has their own eligibility criteria separate from the rest of the hospital. Let me give you an example. I go into the Healing Wings clinic and I'm HIV positive and I need to have services that are HIV related. all of my services based on my eligibility screening, and whether it's at the PMC or at JPS, there may be a copay and there may not be a copay. People 0 to 100% of poverty pay nothing, and then there's a slight increase up to 300% of poverty. So the majority of our clients pay nothing. So at JPS or at Preventive Medicine Clinic, Margie Drake could receive services at either place and pay or be out of pocket the same exact thing. When you're in the JPS system and I break my arm and it's nothing to do with HIV and I have to go to the emergency room, that is not Ryan White funded.
Understood.
But anything that has to do with their HIV disease would be the same whether they're at the PMC clinic or at the JPS clinic. So the eligibility screening for Healing Wings has always been different than the rest, not always, the last 10 years has been different screening process. They've been taking undocumented. Again, they didn't have the ability to get undocumented services perhaps for a broken leg or a car accident or something else. But if it were HIV related, Ryan White funds were there for specialty care services no matter which clinic they went to.
Thank you.
The third thing is that we wanted to make sure that we viewed this whole discussion and potential transition as an opportunity to enhance the quality of client care. And our practice committee, standard practice committee, has been working very hard to not look at this as just one clinic merging into another clinic, but really looking at it as an opportunity to say, what are the best practices, standards nationally, what are the best practices and the strengths and the skills that each subset is bringing to this, and let's create a new, improved quality service out of this. And so that's the direction they're taking with this. And when you hear about all of these subcommittees that we've created, everybody has in view trying to make this an even better experience for the client. We did look at the different staffs. We talked about what staff the two clinics had. And because the population would be doubling if it moved, if we consolidated, JPS felt like they would really need all of the staff that we currently have in our preventive medicine clinic, except for one position. And interestingly enough, the person in that position had tendered her resignation before we got too far along in this discussion process. And so it looks like it's working out very nicely in terms of positions being able to move over to JPS. JPS has told us in the last couple of weeks that it would not be a competitive situation, that as long as they met their standards for employment, that the people in our positions would move over into the same positions at JPS and that
Lou,
clinic.
I don't know by what you're saying, and again, at least from my opinion or from my standpoint, in looking at this, I think you may be under the assumption that the employees in public health are not going to be county employees and that they're going to move over to JPS, and that was certainly not my thought in that process. Again, for several years, your budget has been included in a part of JPS's budget. And I never, at least from my perspective, I never envisioned the county employees not continuing to be county employees. I simply felt like that JPS would begin to be the supervisor of those activities, and that through that supervision, there would be a more up-to-date or knowledgeable aspect of what each side was doing, and there might be the opportunities for more collaboration. Now, we're getting into the very heart of what I would have expected us to be talking about in the joint Commissioners Court and Board of Supervisors meeting. And so, you know, I'm a little, I really wish that we would wait and discuss this at that point in time, and thought today was being more of a briefing, not on how this consolidation might happen, but on what you've been doing as far as trying to come up with collaborative efforts. Because I think to talk about county employees becoming hospital, I mean, if we were to make the decision to let JPS supervise and be a part of overseeing and collaborating the goals and priorities there, and it worked beautifully for a couple of years, then maybe at that point in time, we might explore that. But I would never want to be saying to a county employee, well, we don't want you to be a county employee anymore. I think we want you to become a JPS employee. At least that was not, that has never been a part of my process. And, you know, I think I indicated that I did, you know, the hospital board came by, our chairman and one of the representatives came by last week, and we talked about it with GK. And, I mean, I mentioned at that point that I never expected the employees from the county to become employees of JPS.
We can certainly go back to the table and take that to the table. I think both JPS and us thought that we had been given a deadline to make this happen, and you know, now we know there's not a deadline, and so I think we were both under the impression that this was the scenario.
Let me say that we thought that we would try to make this happen by October 1 simply because of the funding cycle. And these are all grant employees, by the way, but they're still county employees. Lou, let's do this. Let's just give a very brief, let's not go into any of the details. The court has this information. This is what we wanted to do, was simply let you know what we've been working on.
Commissioner Fickus, did you have?
Well, my question was is there some reason why JPS wasn't invited to be here today, or no, you know, anybody from the board or the administration, or?
Well, no, there's no reason why they weren't invited. I mean,
And see, again, we're making certain assumptions, and we haven't had the joint meeting.
Right.
Then why don't we
I think the judge and I are going to end up having some disagreements philosophically on this, but I agree with you that this is premature at this point. And I'm already getting some calls at my office from people who have gotten hold of this rumor that something is going to happen and weighing in on one side or the other. And we haven't even discussed it. So.
And that's exactly what we've been, you know, that's why we asked for the joint meeting. There was never, at least again from my intent, I don't know where the idea came up that county employees were going to become JPS employees. We've said all along that the budget's been under JPS for 10 years. The employees haven't changed at that point in time, and I don't know where this idea came from.
Well, it is good to start looking at ways to collaborate.
Yes, and that's all that we were asking, and I felt like that, again, by bringing those things together, that might happen.
I will take responsibility for the timeline issue, and it was based on a funding issue that we had with the Ryan White grants. Lou, let's just do this.
All right.
You know, we've already considered the HIV clinic consolidation. Members of the court, you see the other areas in our comments that we're working on, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have on this. If not, well then, thank you, Lou. Appreciate it. Members of the court, we can now go to item C. We've already done the legislative update. Item C is the 2006 County Capital Improvements and Transportation Bond Program. What we'd like to do today is to talk with the court about where we are on the projects, and also, just as important as that, and we'll have transportation and audit making those presentations. But please focus also on the amount of dollars that we have currently spent, the amount of money that we anticipate spending for the remainder of 2013, and the amount of money that we believe is going to be obligated on 2014. And the reason is because we are looking at the sale of additional bonds as we move into next fiscal year, and we need to have direction from the court on how you would like for us to proceed. So transportation, Randy's going to begin that presentation, and when we get to the cost piece of that, the auditor's office is going to talk with the court members.
Good morning, Judge, Commissioners.
Good morning.
I have a few slides to show you this morning. Some of this information you've seen before, so I'm going to move rather quickly through these. But certainly, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. At this point, we have 32 projects that have been completed. Well, again, a lot of these projects you've seen before. Some of these are going to be projects that were funded with discretionary dollars, but we wanted to include that in our total list. It's actually very good that we have this many projects complete. You would expect that at this point. We have a total bond investment of $42.7 million that has been expended on projects that are complete. As you might expect from time to time, we have projects that are withdrawn for whatever reason. We have 4 projects that have been withdrawn with a bond investment of $426,000. We really want to draw your attention to these next few slides. We have, for those projects that we have agreements executed, the slides you'll be looking at show the bond funding commitments for fiscal year 2014. Again, these are projects that are under agreement right now. And get to that. There are 14 projects in this area. I won't go through each one of these individually, but the green dot just indicates those projects that are under construction right now. This translates to a bond program investment of almost $10.5 million. And again, these are projects under agreement with funds that are committed through fiscal year 2014. For those projects that we anticipate going to agreement in 2014, and it's difficult to know that, these things, we're kind of taking an educated guess on these. But we've looked at those projects that we believe are going to go to agreement, and you can see what the list of those projects are. We anticipate the bond program investment being close to $15 million. That doesn't necessarily mean that those funds will be expended in fiscal year 2014, but we would be committing those funds should they go to agreement. In fact, let me give my typical disclaimer. The information that you're seeing here is going to be based on project schedules that have been submitted by the cities. Typically every year in July, in the July timeframe, we go and meet with the cities and we get updated project schedules and information from them. So obviously we haven't done that yet, but this is based on the information that we have as of today. And then looking at our projects that are under agreement with funding out through fiscal year 2015, obviously there are fewer projects in this category, and they tend to be the bigger projects. But you can see what those are. I want to bring your attention, though, to the asterisk, because this is important. We are still showing $20 million allocated for fiscal year 2015 for the TexRail project that the Commissioners Court has committed to. My last conversation with officials from the T, that they're still looking at fiscal year 2015 as a year that they would need our bond funds. Obviously, there's a lot of pieces to this particular project. They have not received the federal funding yet, but they do have an agreement in place with DART for trackage rights, and so I believe they're still working with Fort Worth Western on that particular agreement. But as of right now, what I know is that the T is still looking at 2015 for needing our funding.
Did I overlook, Randy, the 377 project? Is it on here somewhere?
The 377 project,
it's an off-system.
We don't have that.
On-system.
It's on system, actually. And we don't have that. We're purchasing right-of-way for that project right now, and we have that up to $1.5 million. And
but that 1.5 is a part of this bond program.
It's not that's not a completed project yet, and that may need to be. Let me make sure I don't have that another area.
You've got a lot of projects on here that are not completed projects.
Sure. And we are in the middle of purchasing that right now. That is accounted for in the information that the auditors will share with you. I may not have that in one of my lists here. We have, I'm not sure what the auditors will be.
I'm the presenter, but do we have that? No, it's a project that we expect to pay for through the end of this fiscal year based on the contract that we have in place, or the agreement we have in place. So it's not part of the funding discussion today. The money's already set aside. It's already set aside for it.
So it's in one of those is that up in one of those earlier numbers?
It's going to be in
The
the
10-5 or the?
talk about that's already
Right.
committed.
Okay.
We've already spent funding on it, so.
The funding's already there.
That's actually my last slide, so I'm going to turn it over to the auditors at this point. So.
You know, I just might want to point out as Renee comes forward that in our anticipated spending for 2014, there is a $4 million for the Saginaw Bridge that we talked about. So that is, we don't have an agreement, but we have accounted for that expense.
Well, we've talked about it.
Yeah, the court has, but we haven't taken.
And it was on this list.
Yeah.
That's why I don't understand why money that we're currently spending is not on this list.
The money that we're currently spending is on this list. If we look at the financial summary, I can't speak to that side, but to the financial summary, if you look at it, the amount expected to be paid by 9/30/2013, that $111,396,211. That is actually based on the payment schedules that we've received from the cities through transportation, and we've already allocated those funds. To date, we've actually only spent $85 million, but we anticipate that by the end of September, we'll have spent the full $111. And so if the money's been put aside and already committed, then it's in this number that we're going to talk about. I can't, again, speak to Randy's schedule.
I raised the issue because it's a matter of equity. This is a project going on in the city of Benbrook, and the people of Benbrook have a right to know that we're spending bond funds on their behalf in their city. Every other project is on there. Go ahead.
Okay. My job today, the way I understand it, is to walk you through the numbers. Laura Wiest in my office works extensively with the administrator's office and with transportation and trying to keep all the buckets intact and know what money's in which bucket and what amounts of money we're committed to and what amounts of money we have yet to have for these projects. And so that's my goal today, is to share that with you. If you look at this slide, we simply start out with the $200 million that was appropriated, or the voters agreed to allow us to sell debt. Today, we've sold the $126,700 that's reflected there. And as we just discussed, the $111 million is what we anticipate having actually spent by the end of this year for the county through September 30th. We would then still have on hand $15,303,789 in proceeds that we've already sold but have not committed to spend. Throughout the life of the bond proceeds, we've also allocated earnings. The court approved allocating interest earnings for various pieces of this project. And of that, we calculate there's another $543,670 worth of interest earnings that's also available for projects that are yet to be funded, so that there's a projected cash that the county would still have out of the original sale of the bond proceeds of the $15,847,000.
The $111 million, by what, and this is where I think we need to maybe see the detail of that 111, because I thought what Randy said just a few minutes ago was that we had $42,750,000 that we had completed, that we had $10,500 that we had agreed to. That total comes to a little over $53 million, and I'm assuming the others. you know, is the other 60 what we've got set aside
Well,
for
when we go to the,
Texrail and the
when we go
desert?
to the next page, then I'm going to
Okay.
talk about the rest
Okay.
of it. I'm sorry. So the 111 is just actual what's spent and what the cities have said they're going to use between now and the end of September, that we're going to spend for the rest of this fiscal year.
Between now and the end of September?
Yes.
We're going to have spent 111.
The 111 million, yes.
Okay.
Okay? So then if we go to the next page, this page, taking the number from the bottom of the page we were just looking at to show the money that we actually have on hand, the 15 million, and then looking at what Randy gave you a few minutes ago is the expected payments for those projects that are under agreement for FY14. I mean, again, that's that number, that's that 10 million number, which again is based on the schedules presented by the cities. And then looking at these new projects nearing agreement, and I guess you just did the 114 bridge today, the court approved that today, but these other items that are nearing agreement, and then looking at the remaining bonds to be sold to figure out what the court's desire might be on how you would fund future projects, because clearly you only have $5 million left when you pay for those projects that are expected to, payments that are expected under those already under agreement, which doesn't leave you sufficient funds to fund the new projects that are nearing agreement.
But Renee, do you have some place where you're showing me what makes up the 111 million? Because from what Randy showed me, I'm nowhere near 111 million.
No, we have that in our office, but we did not have that today.
Okay,
We'll be more than happy to bring that.
We're in agreement with transportation. The bean counters and the transportation department are in agreement with the amount of money that's been expended, and we have that list in detail, and we can provide that. We just did not bring that today.
It didn't appear to be in sync, so I'd sure like to see that, because again, what the numbers that Randy alluded to a few minutes ago, unless I really missed something, we're nowhere near 111 million unless you're including in that the 20 million for Texrail and all of the money for the discretionary monies.
The Texrail is not included, correct? Come on up, Laura.
Randy,
Laura keeps me straight, so.
where did he go?
He's over there. He's hiding behind. You can't see him by the.
He got out of Dodge.
So if we expect the project to complete this year, it's not on Randy's slides.
Okay, so the numbers that he showed on his slides a few minutes ago were completed projects, 42
Right.
million.
Withdrawn projects. So the completed as of
420-something
today.
thousand, so that was piddly. Let's just look at
Right.
43 million for completed projects, agreed to projects for 2014
14.
of 10,500,000, 15 million for 2014 projects. Now, the 15 million for 2014 shouldn't be in the 111.
So what's missing from Randy's slides is what we're going to pay from now, projects that are going to complete this fiscal year, 2013.
So 50, 60 million?
But the 14 million isn't in the 111, correct, Laura?
Correct.
Okay, so before the agreed to and the 43 equals about 53 million. So where's the other, I guess what I'm asking is where's the 58 million?
Right there.
Where's the 58 million that adds up to the 111? There's 58 million missing.
Believe me, it's there. We have gone over these numbers backwards and forwards, but Randy's schedule, go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to point out, these slides doesn't capture every single project.
Now, here's Laura's sheets of
Every
all of
single
the
project.
projects. So there's a lot of them.
This is not comprehensive. These are simply showing you what is anticipated to be spent in fiscal year 2014.
Well, but what was the completed number? The 43, I thought that 43 million, is that just what's going to be completed in 2013?
That's just what is completed already.
Already from the very beginning?
At this point, yes, from the very beginning to right now.
Yeah, well, that wasn't the right answer. You'd have been a whole lot better if you'd have just told me it was 2013 completion. So you say we've completed 43 to date. Didn't you just stand up a few minutes ago and say that for the rest of 2013, you're going to complete 15.8?
For the rest of 2013, I'm not sure I have that number in my slide.
Project cash, no, that's project cash available
Right,
for,
the
okay.
15.8 is money left.
Then let me go back to the one that says agreed to, project payments under agreement, well, that's 2014. Okay. I need to see the reconciliation of what makes up the 111.
Let me ask about two projects. 'Cause nobody said anything, and they're fairly good-sized projects. Golden Triangle Boulevard, North Tarrant Parkway. Where are they?
Those projects we anticipate to be, those projects we anticipate to be completed this fiscal year, and in fact, I anticipate those being completed by the end of the summer.
Okay, is there what's the holdup on North Tarrant Parkway, which has basically been ready and used over a year?
That was certainly a question I posed to the city. They had some issues having to do with the final signal at Smithfield.
Yeah.
And they were working with the contractor on some issues there and reconciling with the
Yeah.
city of Keller. So they're I understand they're now getting ready for the final
Okay.
piece of that. So.
And Golden Triangle Boulevard?
And Golden Triangle, they're looking at completing that contract by the end of the summer.
Okay.
So that's part of that 58 million.
That missing money.
Yeah, there are a lot of those types of projects that are not included in these slides. That wasn't the purpose of those particular slides.
My understanding, again, for today, for what, again, I'm here for, was to show you that we didn't have enough money in the proceeds and the cash that we have in the bank, projected to be in the bank as of the end of September of this year, to fund those projects that are nearing agreement for 2014. And therefore, the court, and I'm sure Mr. Manius, his piece was to discuss with you how you wanted to move forward in selling some of the additional money that the voters agreed to sell for the transportation, to sell some additional bonds.
Let's drop to the bottom line then. We've got $73 million in debt remaining to be sold.
Yes, sir.
When we went to the voters for this bond issue, we promised that we would schedule the sale of the debt such that we would not have to raise taxes to pay off the debt. Now, can we issue $73 million in additional debt under our current M&O rate without having to raise taxes?
When we started the bond package, our M&O rate, our interest in INS rate, interest in sinking, was 0.0321, and that has decreased. As you know, we didn't sell debt for the last couple of years because we had surplus cash that we were going to expend before we went back out into the market. Now, our goal is to go ahead and sell that and not bring you, I don't know about the entire $73 million, but not to bring this court a budget, a combined M&O and INS rate that exceeds what the current overall tax rate is.
Well, we've got some obligations that we've got to pay for at the end of this, by the end of this fiscal year, apparently, and we don't have enough money to do that. So how?
No, we have money to get us all the way through the end of the year for everything that we are committed to. Those agreements, though, that you're getting ready to enter into for 2014, we would not have sufficient funding in 2014, nor do we have funding for the $20 million for the Tex Rail, which is not included in this.
Right. So looking at this number, essentially what you are saying is, at the very minimum, we have to sell about $10 million worth of debt. And if we want to fund the Tex Rail project today, we also have to sell an additional $20 million.
Correct.
Right?
Yes, that's all we're trying to portray to you, is that in order to be able to fund those projects that are nearing agreement through 2014, you need the 10, and then the Tex Rail is the other 20, and then anything else Mr. Manius, of course, wants to.
The issue is that while what we need for 14 is $10, $12 million, however, that doesn't include anything that the Tex Rail issue is the big number setting out there. We're going to need some additional revenues also. One of the things that I would hope as we move forward, and this is not this is a discussion thing now, is that we need to determine if we want to sell 2 years worth of debt or we want to sell smaller increments? And does it make logical sense to sell for 14 and then come back and sell for 15, or do we want to maybe do 14 and 15 together? You know, the pros and the cons on that, first of all, interest rates looks like they're starting to move up now. And second of all, we have this, I know the judge has been interested in the cash reserve issue. If we sell for 15, that means that we're going, though it'll be restricted reserves, that number will increase to a certain extent.
Okay. On some projects that we have done in the past, we have had jobs bid substantially under the budget. Randy, North Tarrant Parkway is one of them.
Yes.
Does your number that Renee has, is that the original number of debt, or is it the actual number? Which there's $3 or $4, $5 million difference.
And they're, yes, and they're actually.
Yes, what?
The three different scenarios. The original allocation was $14 million, a little over $14 million from our bond program. When we saw that project was coming in under, significantly under, the city agreed to do the renewal agreement for this year for $12 million. So the numbers that the auditors, that are included in the auditors, are actually for $12 million from the bond program, because that's what we have under agreement with the city.
When we enter into the agreement with the city, we have to set aside whatever it is that agreement is. And then when that project is finished, there are savings or free up of money.
So let me take this. Wasn't that project about $15 million? And it's a 50-50 project?
The North Tarrant is actually a 65. We have a 65% investment, because there was about $6.6 million that was defederalized for that project. So to make the numbers work, but you're right. It was originally, I want to say it was around 15 to 17. I can't remember the exact amount.
Well, bid under 50.
Right, which would have put our amount closer to the 9.
Closer to. You take half of 15 million. That's 7.5.
And we came out to about $9 million or so, and went with the 65.
Did the city pay the extra $1.5 million?
Well, that's
$2 million.
That's the 65% that we're in for.
I thought we were in for 50%.
That project was originally 50-50, and it had federal funds on it. But we defederalized those funds. In other words, we said we would take on that $6.6 million if the Council of Governments through STPMM funds would backfill. And so that was the agreement that we've had with the city. And so that amount comes to approximately $9 million, $9.5 million.
So is it 9? Okay. A minute ago you said 12.
Our agreement is for 12 with the city.
But the actual number's 9.
When this project is.
Does Renee know that?
The actual amount paid, there's two pieces to it. So it's $8,504,773 and $116,722. So that would be the 9 he's referencing. So that's what we've actually paid.
But my question is, you mentioned this gap of $10 million.
We still have a commitment for $3.4 million, because yes, we set aside the project budget was $12 million.
So if we only spend 9, then you picked up 3 on your 10. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
That money
was
will
the
be,
answer I was looking for.
That money will be released
Thanks.
from that commitment.
So,
Once the project is
so one of the things that looks to me like we need, and from a selfish standpoint, since I get a fifth of those savings to be able to allocate, there's a couple of questions I had. I'm going to follow up on one of his questions, but I would really like a reconciliation of every project that shows what the original budget was, if we've completed it, what we actually spent. I want to, and then I still am not quite following what you were saying to him. Because we defederalized it, should not have changed our agreement with the city, in that the city should still be picking up 50% of whatever ultimately we end up both having to pay. Now, if we got a whole lot more from the federal government, great. But it was never my understanding that we were going to go to the point where we were paying more than what the city in which the project lied was paying.
I've never heard that 65 number until you just
Yeah.
mentioned it.
Well, we've always had that as a 65% because we originally had a project in our bond program for I-35, where there were improvements to I-35. And we had $10 million that was allocated to that project. It was, obviously, that was a very large project, and it became apparent in the early stages of our program that that $10 million would not be spent. It would just stay there allocated. And so when we were approached by the city about the North Tarrant Parkway, they had $6.6 million in federal funds on it. And it would take much longer to build that project. And so the interest was to go ahead and defederalize that. And the way that was done is instead of having a $10 million on I-35, we moved the $6.6 million to the North Tarrant Parkway project. The Council of Government, or the RTC, backfilled that $6.6 million on I-35. So we're not paying more. We're paying an additional 6.6. We've just moved that money over from the I-35 project.
What happened to the 3.4 million on that? Out of that 10 million, did the 3.4 stay on the I-35 project?
I'm not sure I know what.
You told me we had $10 million set aside for I-35.
Oh, there were other funds that were defederalized off of I-35 for, some of them went to US 377, I believe was one of the projects.
Okay, so we're going to still get to the reconciliation, but let's just take your 6.6 that went over to North Tarrant Parkway. What was the total North Tarrant Parkway project?
What was bid or what was submitted to us?
What was the total budget of the project when we put our 6.6 in with some other money?
Right.
How much was the total project that we added 6.6 million to?
Originally, it was submitted to us as a project where we had 7.5 million, the city had 7.5 million plus the 6.6. So I guess that would be approximately 23 million that was anticipated originally for the project.
So you're telling me we ended up going from a 50-50 split to about a 75 or 70-30 split?
Originally, it was a 50-50 split plus the federal funds.
When the federal funds went away and we had to come up with that 6.6, the county furnished all of it instead of the city furnishing any of it?
Right, because we just simply moved it from I-35.
But I-35 was leveraged a whole lot more, wasn't it? Because if our little $10 million in that project was probably leveraged 20 to 1 or something like that. So we took it from a 20 to 1 project to a project where we were paying all of it.
The funding was backfilled. We didn't lose that 6.6. It was just simply moved over. RTC backfilled the 6.6 with federal funds.
So what you're saying is the RTC brought in money and replaced our 6.6.
Right.
So if we'd left it there, it would have been spent and we'd have got leveraged.
If we left it there, it was more effective for that money to be used on a project that needed to be defederalized rather than for it to remain where it was.
It makes sense. I think I can almost get to the point of living with that. But we ended up spending a whole lot more on, but that project certainly wasn't a 50-50, even though you can say that because we put federal money or we backfill someplace else that.
Well, I was in the meeting when we decided to defederalize that project, and there was never anything said about changing the funding percentage. So when he says 65%, it's the first time I've heard that.
Okay, well, anyway, we need a reconciliation.
Yes, we do.
By project that shows if we have savings, that it goes over in this little pot. If we have interest, it goes over in this little pot. If we have overages, whatever we have to do, we need to see something that reconciles from the get-go.
And we have that detail. I mean, we can certainly provide that to Transportation and the County Administrator, and it can be provided to the court.
And then I think along the same type of lines as we get into this discussion about selling, ultimately I think, well, we've talked about cash flow before, And I think we're very near bringing to this court kind of a spreadsheet that will hopefully be able to give you up-to-date on a monthly basis idea of exactly what our cash position is, what of that cash is restricted by categories, and then will allow, as a court, for us to make some decisions with regards to what we feel like are appropriate or necessary reserves. And then to ultimately tell us whether we're currently above or below whatever this court decides it feels like are appropriate reserves. Then based upon that, that might tell us whether, we have extra cash, and that may enter into a decision as to how much we want to borrow. And I think, as GK is saying, with regards to any decision, it's, to some degree, because I think of our cash position, we're going to have the ability to say, do we think now's the time to do it? Do we think interest rates are going to go up or not? And if so, and then look at the cost every time we go about issuing bonds, and there's cost associated with that issue. There is some cost to it. So if we do it every other year versus doing it every year, it's cheaper from that standpoint.
We need our financial advisors in that conversation.
Right. So I think as we get to the discussion about selling and looking at that, that may be one of the briefing items where we need to bring the financial guys in and say, here's the cost, here's what we think interest rates may be going to do, and based upon that, we can, because, for example, with the $20 million for the T, I know that we're moving down that line. I know everybody wants us to move down that line much quicker than what we're moving down it. I don't know for sure whether if we had the $20 million, we'd spend it in 2015. And ultimately, part of me says, until they get they know our money's there. They know we're good for it. And I think at the point in time they need the money, we can write the check. But I'd sure hate to go out and borrow the $20 million.
And just have it sitting there waiting.
And have them sitting there because, this project was supposed to have been completed in 2012. So we could have been earning at least 0.5% and paying 3.5% for the last 3 to 4 years. So I think we're heading in the direction, but I think the cash flow is something that's going to be important, and then bringing our financial advisors in would be a good, and then hopefully we'll have those reserve discussions over the next. Laura's kind of putting together something. In fact, she's laying some stuff out, I believe, and hopefully by either next week or the 25th, we can put before you the initial, and maybe hopefully they'll be able to kind of come around and give you a chance to ask them some questions and express some concerns about that. But we're looking at reserves for our health insurance programs, for our general operating reserves, road and bridge, those types of things. And I think those are all things that we had thought about putting that in as part of the strategic plan, but that's a little bit far off. And I think as we're going through our budget, getting ready for our budget, that's going to be a question that the court's going to have.
We will have that information for the court, so we worked on it and prepared it.
And this is the type of discussion we would hope that we would have had with the court on this, because obviously there's questions to be asked. We're somewhat early in the game as far as making a determination of how much money we need to borrow, if in fact we need to borrow any, because that sale normally occurs in August or September. Members of the court, that's all we have at this time.
There being no more business right now, we'll recess our open meeting and proceed to close to discuss items exempted under 551.071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the
a county road.
No. No, these are in, well, that's debatable.
Having returned from our closed session, we will now address the following matters.
Thank you, Your Honor. Under the District Attorney's Office, item number 1, requesting authorization for the DA's office to cross-appeal in this particular case.
So move.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
The second item, we're requesting authorization for the DA's office to exercise certain rights under this contract and terminate our relationship with this firm.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Robert's going to do the third item.
Commissioners, Robert Browder from the DA's office requesting that the court approve the conflict of waiver submitted by the Jackson Walker Law Firm dated June 5, 2013.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. There being no further business,